and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and abounding in steadfast love. The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 15th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to the father, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I don't know what there is about a wet paint sign that makes all of us want to touch to see if it's really wet. Or the pop machine that has an out of order sign on it, and you were just dying to have that Pepsi, and you'll try to put money in it anyway. It might just work for us. Or we see the sign, "Stay off the grass," or "Use the sidewalks." Nobody's looking, and we go our own way. There's something about our human nature that has to try, regardless of what the signs may say. We know better, but we are still tempted to give it a try. Now, every one of us, we are either currently a child or we have been a child. We know that life, what we learn and how we learn it, is all about trial and error. We bake a batch of cookies and leave out the sugar, and the next time you bake those cookies, you will never forget the sugar. You change the oil in the car and forget to put the plug back in after draining out the old oil. You will never forget again about putting it in after you have cleaned up 2 quarts of oil that seemed to have gone through before you realized that the plug wasn't there. We learn by trial and error. We also like to prove, though, that we don't have to do all the steps that might be involved. We're a little bit better skilled, or, we've never had a problem before. Now, this is something I've never done because I've just never used electric saw of any kind, but I happen to be fascinated by the fact that when you take a board and you go towards the saw, that usually you have another little board behind it pushing it through, or we're supposed to anyway. But there are a lot of people who think, I don't need to do that, never had a problem before, and then years later, missing part of their finger because they didn't use that little step of a board. We like to jump past steps. But you know what we've learned is that consequences shape our daily lives. Consequences have shaped our whole life. Why do we wash the dishes? Because the consequence of not washing over time means that there's nothing to eat on, and the fact that dirty dishes begin to smell and attract bugs and other little creatures. We brush our teeth to keep our breath clean and to discourage cavities and gum disease. We put fuel in the car so that we can get from one place to another. There are consequences of the decisions we make. We are kind to others because it's the right thing to do and because we like being treated the same way. We, every day, operate out of a sense of right and wrong. If you do what is right, then life will probably be better. But if you don't do what is right, you may be punished. How else will we learn our lesson? I always find it amusing when students come in. Usually after a weekend I've had students come in and they're complaining about being grounded, or they got in trouble for something. And if they continue to go on and on and on about it, I will finally say, well, what happened that got you into trouble? And it's usually because they didn't do something they were supposed to do, or they got home late. And then that is usually followed by an excuse or a rationale as to it's probably somebody else's fault and not theirs after all. And usually my comment back to them is, but what did your parents ask of you or expect of you? And why couldn't you do what they asked or expected of you? And what did you do when you realized you couldn't do what was expected of you? And that is usually followed by silence. My son describes basic training as 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of consequences. Early on, he would write, we get a command, we screw up, we do some push-ups, and then you listen. Because that is where the lesson is. That is when we learn what is important. So is it any wonder that when we hear about the parable of the prodigal son, that we relate more to the feelings of the older son? Don't get me wrong. I believe each and every one of us sitting in here today can say we are moved by the Father's love. But we are a bit suspicious of the younger son. After all, his father probably had to sell off part of the land to give him his share. Great sacrifices had been made so that they could provide what the younger son had asked for. They gave up land, they probably gave up cash, They gave up the way that they worked together in order for this little brother to go out into the world to discover. Little brother didn't do so well. In fact, he lost everything they'd given him. And not only did he lose it, he became destitute, living on the streets, doing whatever he had to do just to eat. It was while he was thinking how thankful it would be to be able to get some food, even the food that he was giving to these pigs, that he realized that the servants back home had a better life. It was when he was totally destitute that he realized he wanted to be home. But he also knew that he did not deserve to go home, much less to be accepted there. So he thought, I will go and I will beg my father to allow me to be a servant. I will work as a servant in my own home so that I may eat. He had no pride left. He had no self-respect left. He had lost it all. And there was no guarantee that he would be accepted, regardless of how sorry he was. His father had every reason to punish him, or worse, to disown him, to cast him out, to shame him, to never lay his eyes on him again. The little brother needed to learn a lesson, right? No little squirt is going to go demand his part of the inheritance, forcing this man to sell his land, decreasing his net worth, and then go out and lose it all, not even making a decent beginning, and then come back here expecting me to take care of him? That is not how it works. But this father thought differently. This father acted differently. From the moment he saw his son, the text says, when he saw his son from a distance, he ran to him. You see, the father had been looking for him. He had been looking every day for the sight of his son. And when he saw him, he ran to him. This father was not waiting for his son to come back on his hands and knees groveling. This father didn't need a full confession of everything. This father was waiting for his son to return. And when he did, there was rejoicing, there was a celebration, there was reconciliation. It was, and it is, a different reality than what we expect and live daily. We know this story. We know this story to be about the awesome grace and the love of our God, the awesome grace and love that God gives to each and every one of us. But we struggle with what it means in our own lives. How do we live according to this unconditional love and grace? We all have things in our past that we're not necessarily proud of, things we are ashamed of. We have all had things happen in our lives that has taught us lessons. We've all had to learn the hard way about a couple things probably in our lives. It's hard to reconcile the reality of God's unconditional love while at the same time we live in a world of right and wrongs. Not long ago, I was talking with a dad who was disappointed in the way his son interacted with him. He expected more. And because of that interaction, the father had declined to talk with his son or to help him when he desperately needed the help. The son was also disappointed in the way his father interacted with him, so he stayed away and had decided that he would just have to do things on his own. Well, the father called me one day and talked to me about it. He wanted my opinion to what was going on and how he was dealing with it. So I thought about it for a long while, and then I sent him a message. And the message I sent him went something like this. You know your son is 23 years old. A lot has happened in his life to make him the person he is today. There are some things about your son that you cannot and will not change. So, you can either continue to treat him like you are, or you can choose to have a relationship with him by accepting the fact that he's not going to be the perfect son you fantasize about. Accept him for who he is and have a relationship, or continue punishing him by reminding him of his bad decisions and have no relationship at all. It just dawned on me the other day that one of the choir pieces that the high school choir at our high school here has been preparing for contest is every bit about this parable. And I've been trying to think as we worked on the piece how to talk to them about the words that are in this song. And this morning it all washed back over me that this is exactly about the prodigal son. It's exactly about the God who celebrates each and every one of us. And the words go like this. And the Father will dance over you in joy. He will sing delight in whom he loves. Is that a choir I hear singing praises of God? No. The Lord God himself will sing praises over you in song. God is singing and dancing his love for us. Regardless of what we have done, regardless of how we are feeling at this very moment, there is a song coming from our God rejoicing over you. So come to God's party. Celebrate in this love. Receive the grace that is being given to you at God's party. Amen.